What's up and welcome back to my channel. I thought for my first video back I could talk about my favorite books of 2024. I just wanted to go kind of over like my favorites of the year, so we have at least that yearly video that I always do, and then I can talk about the books that I really just enjoyed and have it like recorded in somewhere for me to have as usual. I usually have a top 10 every year. Have struggled this year to find 10 books, I'm gonna be honest. So I have about 8 here. There's actually a series that I'm counting as one book, but the rest of them are just individual books. So I have about 8 books to talk about rather than 10. I didn't want to kind of force myself to like try to like squeeze in 2 more just to make it 10, because I always do 10 every year. I just kind of wanted to be honest with myself and pick the books that really resonated with me and stuck with me all year. But I don't do a top 10, like I don't rank them from best to worst. These are all my favorites for different reasons. They're all from different genres. I have lit fiction, I have classics, I have a lot of memoir, lots of nonfiction this year. And yeah, so I guess we'll get started. I'll get the series out the way. The series that I read this year that absolutely blew my mind and has lived in my head rent-free since I finished it in June is the Neapolitan Quartet by Elena Ferrante. Sorry for the really dirty spine. This is one of the best, if not the best series I've ever read in my life. It's life-altering, it's life-changing. So I feel like I've talked about them, and you've probably heard about them, but basically it's a 4-book series. It's a quartet. It's set in 1950s Naples, Italy. It follows the life of Elena and Lila and everybody that kind of enters and leaves their lives throughout their entire life basically, together and separately. So the first book starts my brilliant friend, and they are children. They are literally grade school level children, and that's basically the entirety of the first novel. Second book, The Story of a New Name, is actually them in like young adulthood, kind of like teenage going into young adulthood years. And then we have the third book, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, which is set more in like adulthood and but yeah, like legitimate like adulthood and starting to grow like into their womanhood basically. And the last book, The Story of the Lost Child, is old age. I love books and series that really cover the entirety of people's lives. I think there's something very vulnerable to spend so much time with the same characters and to learn them inside and out, that you almost like they become your friends. You kind of expect what they're about to say, what they're about to do. You kind of know where they're going. And yeah, so I wrote in my review of My Brilliant Friend, the novel is popular for its depiction of Elena and Lila's friendship, yet it also discusses the reality of growing up in a violent neighborhood, respectability, politics, class, money, education, identity, girlhood, motherhood, and so much more. I mean, even education in itself is like a very, very, very major and important plot that really follows Lila and Elena's friendship from the moment that they're children. That's how they bond, that's how they get together, and then all the way until their old age, until the last book. Education is so important, especially growing up in such a neighborhood where education is kind of revered and kind of seen as like, you know, if somebody's educated, they're kind of put on a pedestal because they get to have that chance to be educated. And it makes you rethink your relationship with school and education as well. Both of the girls, Elena and Lila, have extremely different personalities, and yet I find that they complete each other in such an interesting way. I don't think one or the other could have another friend that's that way, but I feel like they needed each other. I completed my review with, overall, I'm happy that I gave My Brilliant Friend a second try. I think this is a story that must be read slowly and closely to understand the layers of meaning behind every character, every plot line. The story Ferrante wrote is not one packed with a plethora of twists and turns, but surely one of ambiguity and reality. The story fascinates me, and I'm beyond excited to keep going with the rest of the quartet. I had read the first book, My Brilliant Friend, previously, and I had given it like 3 stars. I don't think I liked it that much, and I left the rest of the series on pause, and then I reread it for a class, and then I ended up reading the rest of the quartet during the summer, and I absolutely adored it. So always give books a second try if you're like in the fence. Like if you're like, usually if I give a book 3 stars, I'm like, this might be better the second time around. Like if I give a 3-star, that book is probably gonna get reread, and then I can make my choice of like, is this good or is it not good? And that's what happened with me and Elena Ferrante, and I'm so glad it did, because that's one of my favorite series ever. Next book is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I have like this very foily copy, which is really cute. I found it like for $4 at a used bookstore, so I'm really happy. When I went into Rebecca, I went into it mostly blind. All I knew of Rebecca was that it's a gothic classic, revered novel by Daphne du Maurier. I think it's her most popular novel, and I really loved it from the first page to the last. There was not a single moment in Rebecca that I found boring or slow or that I wasn't interested in. If it wasn't the prose taking me literally away from the world, it was what was happening or the characters or what was going to happen next. Or I also think it really deserves its title as a classic. I think it depicts marriage and womanhood and growing into womanhood in a way that not a lot of classics of the time could have or would have done. We really see the difference in the contrast between a narrator's life as she is a young girl growing into her womanhood and like basically moving from teenagehood to her womanhood, and the realities of an established wife and how it's like to be a wife and to be married and to live a married life. And I think du Maurier does a really good job at building the tension and the reflections of the differences between both lives and both women, and the characters around as well in the mansion, in the house, in Mendeley were so good. Like it just, the whole narrative and the construction of this novel is actually perfection. It's built to perfection. I think it's not considered a thriller. I wouldn't put it in the category, but if thrillers or like mystery books, novels were written more in this aspect, I think I would be more of a mystery kind of thriller reader. Next book is by an author I absolutely adore. It's my second novel that I've read by her, and it's Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. Celeste Ng is such a brilliant writer. I'm in awe of her, absolutely obsessed with the books she writes. She writes mainly like family dramas and with like deep character deep dives. I'm really a character driven kind of reader. I love plot, I love storyline, but I really love when a writer can really hone in and perfect the way that they write characters, and like it's very singular to that writer, and I feel like Celeste Ng has completely mastered that in a way that like I haven't seen from other authors. I wrote, in Little Fires Everywhere, Celeste Ng displays the sharpness of her prose and storytelling by creating a complicated web of characters who, despite living their own individual lives, end up intertwined in each other's. Everything begins when Mia and her teenage daughter Pearl move into the small planned community of Shaker Heights. Alina Richardson takes it upon herself to provide the newcomers with an affordable housing arrangement in order to make them comfortable. Quickly, both Alina and Mia's children, Trip, Moody, Lexi, Easy, and Mia, become friends, forcing the proximity of their families. There's really like such a rich, messy kind of like storylines, and everybody gets intertwined, and it's so good. There's also a Hulu's adaptation of the book into a show. I watched it immediately after finishing the book, and I loved it. I think sometimes with adaptations, all the times, I'm always super picky, and I'm like, they could have had a better actress, or I didn't like that much. I think the adaptation of Little Fires Everywhere was perfectly done. I watched it in a day. It's like, to be fair, it's like 7 or 8 episodes. It's really short, but it was done to perfection. The casting is incredible, especially for the two mothers, Mia and Alina, played by Kerry Washington and Reese Witherspoon. So good. They were really in character. Like you could tell that either they read the book or they just like studied the hell out of those characters, because it was done so good. The contrast between how they both educate their children and how it doesn't resonate with the other, and also the way that each other live their lives actually doesn't resonate with the other, and whether they like it or not, their lives are mixed because their children are involved with each other. So I don't want to give too much away, but the book, excellent. the show, excellent. I kind of want to rewatch it now, but yeah, Little Fires Everywhere, actually a great read. And I'm really sad because now I only have one last Celeste Ng to read before I've read her entire discography. And I hope that she comes out with a book soon so I have more. This book I read, it was for a class, and I'm so glad that my teacher put it on the syllabus because it's one of those books that if it hadn't been for class, I don't think I would have ever picked it up or read it because I had never previously heard of it. And it's Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangaramba. It's a book that is set in Rhodesia, which is the country name of Zimbabwe 2 years before they would win their independence from the colonial rule. It's about this 13-year-old girl named Tambu who has a lot of pressure on her shoulders as she is the only one of her family able to get an education. The book really explores teenagehood, girlhood, family ties, self-discovery, and it's all written through a post-colonial lens. You can really see in different characters, not only Tambu, but also her uncle and her cousin, the lasting effects of the patriarchal rules of Homestead, which is their home base in Rhodesia. Education is a very big part of the novel because we get to see its impact on each characters and their families and the way that it's a long-lasting effects on people's standing and social class and how they're perceived in the homestead and outside of the homestead. I would say this is such an interesting read and so important. There is a trigger warning for disordered eating, so I would read it with caution. Yeah, but definitely recommend Nervous Conditions, especially if you want to read more outside of like American or Canadian classics. Something written by an African author is great to add, and that is great to add to your TBR list. Next book I read, I think I've talked about it on my channel already. I think I talked about it in my like quarterly wrap up because I was trying to do quarterly wrap up, but that's not gonna happen next year. Not my thing, clearly. But Why I Write by George Orwell, I read it early this year in January, I'm pretty sure, and it is a collection of essays by George Orwell. George Orwell is an amazing writer. I read Animal Farm, I think, for the first time last year, and it made it to my favorites of the year. It's such an awesome read, and another George Orwell is making its way into my favorites list this year, so that's really cool. It's just a collection of essays that they have, I think Penguin has like amassed from Orwell. This is such an important and great read for scholars or creative writers, anybody who writes, even for fun. This is great to just pick up. I think Orwell here really comes back to the source of why writing is important, the impact of writing on each individual and on our society as a whole. One of my favorite quotes of this is, once again, no book is genuinely free from political bias. The opinion that art should have nothing to do with politics is itself a political attitude. So I think in our political climate right now, where people are questioning whether books are political or not, Orwell has answered that question decades ago, and he has said it himself, and I think a lot of writers would argue that writing in itself is a political statement. Reading is political. The banning of books is a political statement in itself. I think this is such a great read. It's really short, and yeah, my favorite essay is the last one for sure on the English language. And yeah, I think Orwell is brilliant writer. Next book is a memoir. It is Hunger, a memoir of my body by Roxane Gay. I was so excited to read this. I've been wanting to read this for a long time. As a woman, as a girl, as a woman of color, our relationship with our bodies are ever changing, and I think reading about it in such a candid and vulnerable way was really refreshing and eye-opening to me, and it makes you feel all the things, especially hunger. Hunger is a very heavy book. There's a list of trigger warnings. There's disordered eating, emotional abuse, fat phobia, mental health, rape, sexual abuse. It's very graphic. It's on the page, so this is something that is not for the faint of heart. It's a book that I take really seriously, and really I carried it with me. A couple weeks after I read it, I really carried that book with me because I felt so much post reading it, while reading it, and post reading it. I wrote a review for it, and I'm really, really proud of my review. And part of it, I wrote, Gay refuses to sugarcoat her difficult relationship with food and the ongoing battle she has been on to control her hunger. Throughout the novel, we come to the realization that her hunger is insatiable, as it is not one that can be sustained by food, seeing as it is a hunger for desirability, understanding, safety that she craves. I think Roxane Gay writes from the perspective of somebody who has a hypervisible body, but feels invisible in all aspects of life, not being able to sit in the bus or the metro or the restaurant or the cinemas because the seats are so small that they're not really accommodating to somebody who's plus size. And I'm not talking plus size like extra large or XXL. I'm talking somebody who's morbidly or super morbidly obese according to the BMI scale. It really is eye-opening to this novel, this writing. What she says is really eye-opening to how our society and everything, every installation is very much so biased towards skinny or able-bodied people, and how we have done nothing in order to accommodate everybody that is of bigger size, because it's not the targeted size, or it's not the desirable size. So, and she talks at length of the failure of the medical system, and how when you're a plus size person and you come in for any kind of like problem that has nothing to do with your weight, it always kind of comes back to your weight. But yeah, this is an incredible read. I loved it, and especially did not know before reading this that Roxane Gay was Haitian, and that was a really plus, a bonus, a highlight. And I definitely want to read Bad Feminist by her and all her other work, honestly, because she's an incredible writer as well. So really moving, really touching, and I love her. I love big women. I love big girls. So this book kind of goes hand in hand with this one, and it's The Cancer Journals by Audre Lorde. I talked about it a little bit in my Must Read Books by Black Authors book in last February, but just in case you didn't know, this is a amazing, beautiful testimony by Audre Lorde herself, who talks about her realities as a cancer patient in the 1970s, as a Black, queer, lesbian woman. She talks about her realities as a breast cancer patient, and also post-mastectomy, which is just the removal of the breast, and how the public, society, and doctors would perceive her as somebody who refused actively to wear a prosthesis, which is basically a fake breast after the removal of the breast, in order to have the appearance of having both breasts still. She refused to do that because she didn't want to conceal behind a prosthesis. She didn't see the point. She didn't see the need for it, which is remarkable. She listened to herself and her own intuition that told her that she didn't need that at the time, and she was told that it was weird by medics, by doctors, that it would make her feel better if she would convert to wearing one, which is insane. She really shatters the idea of what it's like to be a survivor or a victim. She doesn't even dare to call herself that. She calls herself a warrior. This is one that I absolutely recommend as well. Like, it's so beautifully written and really thought-provoking, and really puts into questions our medical system and our medical professionals, and what they are telling us that is right or not right, and how sometimes what you feel and your intuition might even be better than what anybody else is telling you. I love this. I definitely want to read more by Audre Lorde for sure. This was my introduction to Audre Lorde, which I know is crazy, but absolutely adore her. She's insane. And the last book is also a memoir / autobiography, Elvis and Me by Priscilla Beaulieu Presley, which was Elvis's wife. I had a mini obsession post watching Priscilla this year. I watched Elvis the movie, and it basically glossed over Priscilla in that movie. It really was more like a movie about Elvis's accolades and like his career, more so than his relationship. And Priscilla came out, and I watched that, and I absolutely adored it. Sofia Coppola's lens is incredible. I really want to watch more of her movies. But nonetheless, I was obsessed with the movie, and then I ended up buying the book and reading the book, and I was obsessed with the book. And then I watched a bunch of Priscilla interviews and a bunch of Sophie Coppola interviews, and I just fell in the lore of Priscilla and Elvis's relationship, and realized quickly enough that at the time their relationship was really romanticized and really revered, and people didn't have much to say about their relationship age gap, which is insane to me because Elvis and Priscilla got together when she was 14, and I think Elvis was 20, maybe 21. I don't remember for sure the numbers, but she was obviously underage. Priscilla doesn't use this biography to vilify Elvis in any way. She seems to me somewhat scared to even tarnish his legacy of his name. This obviously came out, this autobiography was published maybe 4 years after his death, so it was very fresh still. So I don't think her intention was to talk about a man that she has spent the entirety of her life with in a negative light, or it was still so fresh in the public eye that Elvis was dead that I don't think that she even had it in her to show the negative sides of Elvis. She does a little bit. She'll like tackle a couple of different things that he would say or do that not only rubbed her the wrong way, but their entire team and their surroundings and their families and people. She humanizes him a lot. She makes him less of Elvis Presley, the big pop star, and more of like Elvis, like my husband, the man that I was with from a very young age, the man that has taught me everything I know, the man that has shaped me into being the woman that I am. Despite her attempt at protecting him and his legacy and who he was, I think the power imbalance of their relationship is very palpable, and it's very sad to read. And I mean, ultimately, she got to leave him when he was still alive. She got to get closure from that relationship, and I'm happy for her. But I am very sad for young Priscilla, who will never really get to be a young girl again. Definitely worth the read. Really, really interesting and good read. And that's about it. These are my favorite reads of 2024. No, I was gonna talk for this long, but I was gonna do some honorable mentions, but I think I really like just sticking. I'm just gonna stick to the books that I really love, that really resonated with me. And these definitely did. These are the books that I know we'll probably reread in the future and talk about for years to come. And yeah, so let me know if you've read any of these at all, or if you're interested in any of these, if you're adding them to your TBR, let me know. I want to know your thoughts after you read them. And let me know 1 or 2 of your favorite books from the year. Just list them below and tell me why those were your favorites. Thank you so much for watching. Leave me a big thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in my next video.